Today we celebrate Gaudete Sunday, Joyful Sunday. And in this gospel, all these different people in different states of life are coming to John the Baptist. And the scriptures say that they were all filled with expectation for what is to come. And they all have the same question: what is it that we should do? And what the church is telling us today with Gaudete Sunday, that always takes place on the third Sunday of Advent, is you must enter into the joy of the expectation of the Lord. And that's a hard commandment, right? To someone telling you should just be joyful. It's not something that can be forced upon us from outside. But if you think about it, it's like the closer you get to anything, say you've been fasting all day, and you're going to have a great meal that evening. The closer you get to that meal, the more joyful we naturally become. Right? And that the church is telling us we should have this joyful expectation as we're getting closer to Christ. So what I want to meditate on today is, really the question is there anything that's impeding me right now in this state in my life today from entering into the joy that we're commanded to live, especially in this time of our faith? You know, when I was a seminarian, we had an 8-day spiritual exercise. You do this once a year, 8 days in silence. And this priest was giving us a talk during that 8-day retreat. And he was talking about his own he did a 30-day silent retreat according to the Jesuit spiritual exercises. So a long time just meditating. And in this meditation, every single day you meditate on different aspects on the life of Jesus Christ, from his birth, his passion and death, his resurrection and ascension, as a way to really take his life into ourselves and see how does this reflect my own journey. Well, at one point, they all meditate on the birth of Christ, on nativity. And he said that he had such a revulsion to meditating on the nativity of Christ. It was his first time he was ever put in a position where he was forced to think about Jesus' birth. And so in this, they're told, take the nativity passages from Luke and maybe Christ being born in Bethlehem and see yourself as outside the barn, and going in, and what gifts are you going to bring Jesus, and what's that experience like? And he said when he went to meditate on it, he found himself outside a dark cave. And he saw these shepherds and all these people walking into the cave to visit Christ, and he didn't want anything to do with it. And he just sat out there. And he said that the entire meditation, he couldn't do anything. And so later on, he goes to his spiritual director, because you have spiritual direction every single day. And his director asked him how his prayer was going that day, and he told him about that experience. He's like, well, maybe you need to go back to that. He's like, no, I'm ready to move on to the next thing. Maybe let's go to the fleeing to Egypt or Christ's hidden life in Nazareth. He's like, no, we're going to stay at the nativity. You need to go back and meditate in that same place and see what the Lord brings to you. For 4 days straight, he sat outside the cave. Every single day in prayer, he just sat outside the cave, watching different people going in and coming out, and he refused to go in. And what came in through his dialogues with his spiritual director was something he'd been running away from for a lot of his life, the memory of his own birth. Because his mother had died at a young age, right? But at one point, he didn't know why she had died. Just knew that, she had died when he was young. Until one time, his aunt, she was always very kind of cold to him. She didn't speak to him much. But one time, he heard her talking in another room when he was about 13 years old, saying, yeah, that's because my sister had to die so that he could have life. Terrible thing to say, but his mother died giving birth to him. And so ever since he heard that, he felt like his own birth was a mistake or something that, had brought sorrow into his family. And so he refused to celebrate his own birth or even the birth of Christ. And so as he's praying over this, every day the spiritual director kept him here. He said at one point, as he's doing this Lectio Divina, on the fourth day, he experienced in his prayer Mary walking out of that cave. And she was holding Christ in her arms. And she tried to give Jesus over to this priest to hold, and he was afraid to. And she said to him, "He was born to die for all of us, so that we all might have life." But when he looked at her eyes, he saw what joy Mary had in the offering of her Son. And he experienced also the joy that Christ himself lived in, knowing that he would give his own life for his own people as a gift. And he said he thought about in that moment that his own joy at offering his life as a priest. And those words came back to him, "There is no greater love than to lay down your life for the ones that you love." And at that moment, he re-envisioned his mother, that she was joyful and happy to offer her life for him. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like his birth was just a tragic curse. And it changed the way that he experienced Christ's birth. And in that, he was able to walk into the cave and rejoice with everybody around the birth of Christ. And his reflection on this, he asked us, what is keeping you from entering into the joy of your faith? And if you don't ask that question, sometimes there's things in our life that we don't even realize are suffocating our hearts or our faith because of the experiences that we've had in life. And when I took this kind of inception, like it's a story within a story within a story. So I'm in my 8-day retreat at this time. And I go to my spiritual director, and we're praying on these things. And at that time, I had a great frustration with the word joy. Because I felt like joy was something that people who are really liberal use to put down traditional Catholics or Catholics who are seeing real problems in the world. And so I didn't like the word joy. I thought it was kind of just a clown-like Catholicism, where you're not really going into the depths of the faith. And as I was praying over this, I realized how my faith, instead of feeding my life and my love and my joy for family, for existence, for the faith, it was actually being clogged little by little. And I realized at one point, I saw myself in my prayer that I was like the older brother in the prodigal son story, that I was outside the house where everybody was rejoicing. And I was judging God, the hierarchy, because I saw them as too merciful and not taking sin seriously. I was judging my brother. I was judging other Catholics, saying that we're not holy enough as a church. And I was judging the Father's house, the party, which is the liturgy, what we're doing right now. There should be no deeper joy than we have than entering into the liturgical life of the church. But I was judging that because I saw it as insufficient. And these weren't things that were on the top of my mind. They were much deeper and hidden. But what I realized is all this judgment was keeping me from entering into the joy of our faith, the joy of salvation. And what I want to emphasize here, I didn't know that was happening. In the same way, that priest didn't know that that was happening to his own faith because of his experiences in life. And it was only when we were forced in prayer to enter into that dialogue with the Lord that these things were revealed. So we really have to ask in this time, is there anything in my life on a personal level, on my family level, on the state of the world around me, is there anything that's impeding me from entering into the joy of this Christmas season? Or even more generally, the joy of our faith. G.K. Chesterton has a really beautiful quote. He says, "Man is more himself, man is more man-like, when joy is the fundamental thing in him, and grief the superficial. Melancholy should be an innocent interlude, a tender and fugitive frame of mind. Praise should be the permanent pulsation of the soul. Pessimism is at best an emotional half-holiday. Joy is the uproarious labor by which all things live." The uproarious labor by which all things live. What he's saying is joy should really be the foundation of who we are as Christians in this world. And what joy tells God is that I know that you're in charge. And I'm grateful for the life that you give me. I'm grateful for who I am and where I am and your work for me in salvation. And that can never be forced on anybody. No one that can ever make us be joyful. It has to be a response to seeing God's presence and work in our lives. And if we do not pray and ask those questions, then that revelation can't occur. And have you ever had that experience? Like, there's a rule, right? That, when you give a gift, the more intimate the gift is, the more we're looking for the person's reaction, right? Are they actually rejoicing in the gift that I'm giving them? And the more personal you make that gift, the higher the stakes. There's nothing more personal that Christ could ever give us in Christmas than himself. There's nothing more personal that Jesus could ever give us in every Mass we come to than himself in the Holy Eucharist. And maybe he's looking at us. Maybe he's really attentive to that reception of the gift and asking, do you like it? Is it enough for you? Is the gift of myself, is that enough to be the source of your joy, the foundation of your being in this time? What is keeping me right now in my life from entering into the joy of this Christmas season? It's the first thing we need to ask. And then that needs to go to prayer with our Lord. We need to bring that to him so he himself can reveal that answer. It doesn't have to be an emotion. It's not superficial. It's something that, like G.K. Chesterton says, it wells up from the depths of our being. It makes us more fully who we are. And that's what Gaudete Sunday is reminding us to live in. That uproarious labor by which all things live. Which is the deepest message of our faith. Which is the gift of Christ himself given to me. Can that be the foundation and source of the joy of my life?